The arrival of the human ship. The vast emptiness of space was filled with the shimmering lights of the alien fleet, hundreds of starships gathered near the edge of a contested star system. The fleet, belonging to the mighty Zarkan Empire, was preparing for an invasion. Their target, a resource-rich planet that was home to a growing human colony. For the Zarkans, it was just another conquest, a routine operation to expand their empire's reach. Admiral Klex stood on the command deck of his flagship, gazing at the holographic map. He was confident. His fleet was the most advanced in the sector, equipped with weapons that could tear apart planetary defenses in minutes. The humans were insignificant to him, weak, inexperienced, and no match for Zarkan technology. But then something strange happened. "Admiral, we're picking up an anomaly," reported one of the officers. Her voice trembled slightly, though she tried to mask it with professionalism. "What kind of anomaly?" Klex asked, his eyes narrowing. "A single ship, sir. It's on an intercept course with our fleet." Klex let out a sharp laugh. "A single ship? They must be desperate." The officer hesitated. "Sir, there's something odd about it. Its energy signature. It's unlike anything we've seen before." "Patch it through," Klex ordered, now slightly intrigued. The holographic display shifted to show a lone vessel gliding through the darkness. It was small compared to the massive Zarkan warships, sleek and unassuming. Its hull shimmered with a strange metallic sheen that seemed to absorb the light around it. There were no visible weapons, no markings, and yet it exuded an aura of quiet menace. "Scan it," Klex barked. "I want to know what we're dealing with." The officers worked quickly, their hands flying over glowing consoles. But the results only deepened the mystery. "Admiral," the lead scientist finally said, her voice shaking, "our scanners can't get a clear reading. The ship's hull is disrupting all attempts to analyze it. It's almost as if it's alive." Klex scoffed. "Nonsense. It's just human trickery. Send a squadron to intercept and destroy it." "Yes, sir," the officer replied, though there was unease in his tone. As the squadron of Zarkan fighters closed in on the strange vessel, Klex watched with smug anticipation. But then, something happened that wiped the smirk off his face. The human ship didn't evade or fire. It simply stopped. "What is it doing?" Klex muttered, leaning forward. The Zarkan fighters surrounded the vessel, their weapons locked on. "This is Commander Threx of the Zarkan Empire," one of the pilots announced over the comms. "Identify yourself or be destroyed." There was no response. Instead, the ship began to emit a low, humming sound that resonated through the void. It wasn't just a sound. It was a vibration, a force that rattled the Zarkan ships and sent chills down their spines. "Fire!" Threx shouted, but it was too late. The human ship moved. No, it didn't move. It vanished, only to reappear behind the squadron in the blink of an eye. Before the Zarkan pilots could react, their systems went haywire. Screens flickered, engines stalled, and weapons shut down. One by one, the fighters disappeared from the Zarkan fleet's sensors. "Admiral," an officer cried, "we've lost contact with the entire squadron." "What do you mean, lost contact?" Klex roared. "Did they retreat?" "No, sir. They're gone. There's no trace of them. It's as if they were erased from existence." Klex felt a rare pang of unease. He prided himself on being unshakable. But this was different. "Send a message to the ship," he commanded. "Demand their surrender." The comms officer hesitated before nodding. The message was sent, but the response they received was chilling. The human ship transmitted a single line of text. "Turn back now, or face the consequences." Klex's hands tightened into fists. How dare these humans threaten the Zarkan Empire? "Prepare the fleet," he snarled. "We will obliterate that ship and teach these primitives a lesson they'll never forget." But even as he gave the order, doubt crept into his mind. The human ship remained motionless, as if it were daring them to attack. Its silent defiance was more unnerving than any weapon Klex had ever faced. The Zarkan fleet's engines roared to life, their weapons systems lighting up the darkness. Admiral Klex stood tall, his voice booming across the command deck. "Destroy it." The first wave of missiles streaked toward the human ship, their fiery trails cutting through the void. But before they could reach their target, they vanished, disappearing as if they had never existed. Gasps filled the command deck. Klex's heart pounded in his chest. What just happened? "Admiral," the scientist whispered, her face pale. "I don't think we're dealing with just a ship. This is something far beyond us." The human vessel began to glow, its hull radiating a strange, ethereal light. A deep voice echoed across the Zarkan fleet's communication channels, though it seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. "You were warned." Klex stared at the display, his confidence crumbling. For the first time in his illustrious career, he felt the icy grip of fear, and as the human ship began to move again, he realized that this was no ordinary battle. It was a reckoning. The first encounter. The Zarkan fleet hovered in tense silence. Admiral Klex's confidence had been replaced by a gnawing uncertainty. The lone human ship had already done the impossible, erasing an entire squadron without firing a single visible shot. Yet, despite the unsettling warning, Klex's pride refused to let him retreat. "Admiral, what are your orders?" an officer asked hesitantly, the unspoken fear heavy in the air. Klex clenched his jaw. "We are the Zarkan Empire. We do not back down from primitives. Assemble a strike team, our fastest and most agile fighters. We'll overwhelm that ship and crush it." The strike team, comprised of 12 elite ships, launched from the hangars of the Zarkan fleet. Each fighter was sleek and deadly, equipped with advanced cloaking devices and precision weaponry. These were the Empire's finest pilots, trained to adapt to any situation. If anyone could handle the human ship, it was them. The strike team approached the human vessel cautiously. The lead pilot, Commander Threx, opened a secure channel to his squadron. "Stay sharp. Whatever this ship is, it's no ordinary craft. Don't engage until I give the signal." As they closed in, the human ship remained eerily still, as if it were waiting. It wasn't just a vessel. It felt like a predator, silently observing its prey. "Switch to cloaking," Threx ordered. Instantly, the Zarkan ships shimmered and disappeared from sight, blending seamlessly into the blackness of space. "Let's see how they handle this." The fighters spread out, surrounding the human ship in a perfect formation. They moved silently, undetectable even to the most advanced sensors. But just as they prepared to strike, something unexpected happened. Inside the cockpits, strange glitches began to appear. Lights flickered, navigation systems reset, and targeting arrays refused to lock onto the human ship. "Report," Threx demanded as his own instruments faltered. "Commander, my systems are acting up," one pilot exclaimed. "It's like the ship knows where we are." Before Threx could respond, a low, resonant hum filled the comms. It wasn't a noise from the Zarkan fleet. It was coming from the human ship. The sound grew louder, vibrating through their vessels and into their very bones. "Shut it off," Threx yelled, but the hum wasn't a signal they could block. It wasn't just sound. It was something deeper, something that reached into the core of their ships. One by one, the Zarkan fighters began to lose power. Engines sputtered and died, leaving the ships drifting helplessly. The cloaking devices failed, revealing the strike team as sitting ducks in the cold void. "Fall back," Threx ordered, panic creeping into his voice. But it was too late. The human ship finally moved. It didn't accelerate or attack. It simply vanished. One moment it was there, and the next, it reappeared directly behind the Zarkan squadron. A strange energy field pulsed from the ship, spreading outward like ripples in a pond. The Zarkan fighters caught in its path flickered and disappeared from the fleet's sensors. On the command deck of the flagship, Admiral Klex watched in disbelief as the blips representing his elite squadron vanished one by one. The holographic display showed no debris, No explosions, just empty space where the fighters had been. "What's happening?" Klex roared. "Where are they?" An officer stammered, unable to provide an answer. "It's as if they were erased, Admiral. No traces, no wreckage, nothing." Inside the last remaining fighter, Threx fought to regain control. His ship was spinning out of control, alarms blaring and displays glitching. Through the chaos, he saw the human ship's glowing hull appear directly in front of him. A calm, synthesized voice filled his cockpit. It wasn't Zarkan. It wasn't human. It was something else. "Your actions have consequences. You were warned." Before Threx could respond, the ship's systems shut down completely. His fighter drifted, powerless and silent, as the human vessel's light enveloped him. The last thing he saw was the shimmering glow of the ship's hull before everything went dark. Back on the flagship, the tension was palpable. The command deck was silent except for the faint hum of machinery. Klex stared at the blank display where his strike team's signals had once been. "This is impossible," he muttered. "No technology can do this." "Admiral," one of the scientists whispered, her voice trembling. "I believe we're dealing with something far beyond human technology. This ship doesn't obey the laws of physics as we understand them." Klex rounded on her, his frustration boiling over. "Are you saying humans have surpassed us? That they've somehow created a weapon more advanced than the Zarkan Empire?" The scientist hesitated before shaking her head. "No, Admiral. I'm saying this ship isn't just human. It's something else entirely." The human vessel drifted back to its original position, once again motionless. A message appeared on the Zarkan fleet's main display, glowing in an ancient, unfamiliar script. "Turn back now, or face extinction." Klex's hands tightened into fists as he stared at the words. His pride and rage battled against the growing fear in his chest. For the first time in his career, he wasn't sure if he could win. "Admiral, what are your orders?" an officer asked, breaking the heavy silence. Klex didn't answer immediately. His eyes were fixed on the mysterious ship, a vessel that had just dismantled his best squadron without breaking a sweat. Finally, he spoke, his voice cold and hard. "We're not retreating. Prepare the fleet for full engagement." The officers exchanged uneasy glances but obeyed. Deep down, they all shared the same thought. This was not a battle they could win. But Klex would not allow the Zarkan Empire to bow to a single human ship. The human warning. The Zarkan fleet moved into battle formation, its hundreds of warships creating an intimidating wall of firepower. The command deck of the flagship buzzed with activity as officers prepared for full-scale engagement. Admiral Klex stood at the center, his eyes locked on the holographic display showing the lone human ship. It was still motionless, a quiet specter in the darkness of space. "Admiral," one of the officers reported, "all systems are online, and the fleet is ready. Shall we proceed with the assault?" Klex clenched his fists. The human ship had humiliated him twice now, erasing an entire squadron, and then taunting him with cryptic warnings. He couldn't let the Zarkan Empire appear weak. "Send a warning shot," he ordered. "I want to see how they react." The Zarkan flagship's massive energy cannon powered up, glowing bright blue as it charged. A low hum filled the deck, building to a deafening crescendo. The crew watched as the cannon unleashed a concentrated beam of energy straight at the human ship. It streaked through space with unrelenting force, aimed directly at the mysterious vessel. For a moment, Klex allowed himself a triumphant smirk. But then, the beam stopped. No explosion, no impact. The energy simply disappeared, absorbed into the human ship's hull without a trace. The ship remained unharmed, its surface shimmering faintly as if mocking their efforts. What just happened?" An officer stammered, his voice trembling. "It absorbed the shot," the ship's lead scientist whispered, her face pale. "No known material should be able to withstand that kind of energy." "Enough excuses," Klex bellowed. "Prepare the entire fleet to fire. I want that ship reduced to dust." Before the order could be carried out, the human vessel moved. It didn't accelerate or fire back. It simply began to glow. The ship's metallic surface radiated a soft, pulsing light, and then a transmission was sent across the Zarkan fleet. The voice was calm and emotionless, synthetic yet commanding. You were warned. Turn back now or face annihilation. The words echoed through every Zarkan ship, repeating in their language and several others. The message wasn't just heard, it was felt, resonating deep within the minds of every crew member. Admiral, the communications officer said, his voice shaking. The transmission. It bypassed all security protocols. It's broadcasting directly into our systems. How is that possible? Klex demanded, though the answer didn't matter. He couldn't show weakness now. Ready the fleet, he barked. All ships, open fire. The Zarkan fleet unleashed its full might. Waves of missiles, energy beams, and plasma cannons roared toward the human ship, lighting up the void like 1,000 suns. The display on the flagship showed the combined power of the fleet, enough to destroy a small moon. But as the barrage reached the human ship, the weapons seemed to dissolve into nothingness. The missiles disintegrated mid-flight, energy beams bent and scattered, and plasma bursts fizzled out before they could touch the vessel. The human ship remained untouched, its glowing surface undisturbed by the onslaught. Admiral, the attacks are having no effect. An officer cried. The ship it's invincible. Klex's pride refused to accept the truth. Impossible. No ship is invincible. Keep firing. The human vessel responded at last. Without a single visible weapon, it released an energy pulse that rippled outward like a shockwave. The Zarkan fleet's systems faltered as the wave hit, lights flickering and engines sputtering. Entire ships lost power, drifting helplessly in the void. Klex watched in horror as his once mighty fleet descended into chaos. He slammed his fist against the console. What's happening now? Admiral, the lead scientist said, her voice barely above a whisper. This isn't just a ship. It's a force beyond our understanding. It's as if it's rewriting the rules of physics. The human vessel sent another message, its tone colder and more menacing than before. This is your final warning. Leave now or be erased. Klex's officers looked to him for guidance, their faces pale with fear. But the Admiral's pride refused to let him retreat. We are the Zarkan Empire, he growled. We do not bow to anyone, least of all humans. Prepare to. Before he could finish, the human ship disappeared. It didn't accelerate or warp. It simply vanished, leaving behind only silence. Where did it go? Klex demanded. Find it. Admiral, the sensor officer stuttered. I think it's behind us. Klex spun toward the display, and his worst fear was confirmed. The human ship had reappeared directly behind the flagship, its glowing hull now pulsing with ominous energy. The voice returned, filling the air with its cold, mechanical precision. You have chosen war. You will face the consequences. Before anyone could react, the ship released another pulse, this one sharper and more focused. The energy wave engulfed the flagship, causing systems to overload and sparks to fly across the command deck. The crew screamed as consoles exploded and lights dimmed. Klex clung to his station, his mind racing. How could this be happening? How could one human ship destroy an entire fleet without firing a single traditional weapon? As the flagship's systems began to fail, the human ship transmitted one final message. You have one last chance to leave. Fail to comply, and your fleet will cease to exist. Klex stared at the holographic display, now filled with static. His fleet was in shambles, his pride in ruins. And yet, deep inside, a new emotion took root. Fear, not just for his life, but for the survival of the Zarkan Empire itself. Would he heed the warning, or would his arrogance lead to the fleet's doom? The fear spreads. The once mighty Zarkan fleet floated in disarray, its ships scattered like leaves in a storm. Crew members rushed to repair critical systems, their movements frantic as fear gripped their hearts. No one dared to speak the truth aloud, but it was written on every face. This battle was no longer about victory. It was about survival. Admiral Klex paced the command deck of his flagship, his mind racing. The human ship had done the unthinkable, neutralizing his fleet's most advanced weaponry without breaking a sweat. And now, it was toying with them, reappearing and disappearing like a phantom. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, his voice trembling. "We're receiving distress signals from multiple ships. They're reporting strange occurrences." Klex turned sharply. "What kind of occurrences?" The officer hesitated, as if unsure how to put it into words. "Ships are losing power in isolated sections. Crews are reporting phantom noises, flickering lights, and some say they're seeing things." "Seeing things?" Klex barked, his patience wearing thin. "What nonsense is this?" "They claim to see figures moving through the halls." "Admiral," the officer replied, lowering his voice. "Shadows that vanish when approached, and voices, whispering." Klex clenched his fists. "More human tricks. They're trying to rattle us. Tell the fleet to focus and prepare for another assault." On one of the smaller frigates, the crew huddled in the dimly lit engine room. The ship's main power grid had failed, leaving them reliant on emergency lighting. The air was thick with tension as whispers echoed through the corridors, voices speaking in a language no one recognized. "Did you hear that?" a young officer asked, clutching his weapon tightly. "Keep your head down," the engineer snapped. "It's just your imagination." But then, a shadow darted across the room, too fast to be natural. The crew froze, their eyes wide as the temperature in the room seemed to drop. The whispers grew louder, circling them like a predator stalking its prey. "We need to get out of here," one crew member muttered, backing toward the exit. Before anyone could respond, the ship's emergency lights flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. The last thing they heard was a low, resonant hum, the sound of the human ship's energy signature, before everything went silent. Back on the flagship, Klex struggled to maintain control. Reports of similar incidents poured in from across the fleet. Power failures, unexplainable phenomena, and disappearing crew members. It was as if the human ship was waging a psychological war, tearing apart their morale without firing a single visible weapon. "Admiral," the lead scientist said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I don't think this is conventional technology. The human ship, it's manipulating space-time. It's targeting our fleet on a fundamental level, destabilizing our reality." Klex glared at her. "Are you saying this ship is some kind of god?" "No," she replied, her expression grim. "But whatever it is, it's beyond our comprehension." The human vessel appeared again, this time in the middle of the fleet. Its hull glowed brighter than ever, casting an eerie light over the surrounding ships. It didn't attack or move. It simply hovered, as if daring them to act. Klex's resolve wavered, but his pride refused to admit defeat. "Order the fleet to form a perimeter around that ship. I want all weapons trained on it. If it moves, we fire." The fleet obeyed, encircling the human ship with a wall of firepower. But as they moved into position, the anomalies grew worse. Ships experienced gravity fluctuations, with some crew members reporting the sensation of floating despite the artificial gravity systems being operational. Others felt crushing pressure, as if the weight of a planet was pressing down on them. And then, without warning, the human ship sent another transmission. "You still refuse to understand," the voice said, calm and cold. "You do not belong here. Leave now, or face extinction." Klex slammed his fist onto the console. "How dare they threaten the Zarkan Empire? We will not be intimidated by one ship. Ready the fleet for a final assault." "Admiral, please," the scientist pleaded, her eyes filled with fear. "This isn't a battle we can win. If we don't retreat, we risk losing everything." Klex ignored her. "Fire on my command." But before he could give the order, the human ship acted. It emitted a low-frequency pulse, and the effects were immediate. Entire sections of the Zarkan fleet began to vanish. Not explode, not retreat, but vanish. The ships disappeared from the sensors, leaving behind only empty space. "What's happening?" Klex demanded, his voice rising in panic. "They're gone," the sensor officer replied, his hands shaking. "No wreckage, no escape pods, just gone." The remaining ships began to falter, their crews succumbing to the growing fear. Rumors spread like wildfire, whispers of a cursed ship sent by vengeful gods. Some captains defied orders, retreating into hyperspace without permission. Others sent desperate messages to the flagship, begging for guidance. Klex stared at the display, his fleet dwindling before his eyes. The human ship had turned his proud Armada into a broken, terrified shell of its former self. And yet, he couldn't bring himself to retreat. The human ship sent one final message, its voice colder and more menacing than ever. "You were given a choice. You refused. Now you will face the consequences." The lights on the flagship dimmed as the human vessel's glow intensified. Klex realized, too late, that he had underestimated his opponent. This wasn't just a ship, it was a reckoning. The desperate counterattack. The flagship's command deck was bathed in a dim, flickering light, a stark contrast to the once vibrant and bustling nerve center of the Zarkan fleet. Admiral Klex's jaw was clenched, his pride battling against the creeping reality that the Zarkan Empire might lose everything in this confrontation. "Admiral, the fleet is falling apart," an officer cried out. "More ships are vanishing with each pulse. We have to retreat." Klex glared at him, his pride unwilling to entertain the idea. Retreat is not an option. This is nothing more than an advanced human trick. We just need to overpower it." The officer hesitated but didn't dare argue further. Klex turned to the lead engineer. "Activate the dreadnought. I want it armed and targeting that ship immediately." The Dread Reaper, the largest and most destructive vessel in the Zarkan fleet, had been held in reserve, a fail-safe weapon designed to annihilate entire planets if necessary. Its activation caused a low rumble that resonated through the fleet as its colossal energy cores powered up. The ship was a massive floating fortress, bristling with weapons capable of obliterating anything in its path. As the dreadnought moved into position, its size dwarfed even the largest cruisers in the fleet. Its main cannon, a planet killer known as the Crimson Spear, began to charge, drawing power from its enormous energy reserves. "Admiral, the Dread Reaper is ready," the weapons officer announced, though his voice carried an undertone of dread. "Awaiting your command." Klex nodded, a flicker of hope returning to his hardened features. "Target the human ship and fire. Let's see how invincible it really is." The human ship remained motionless, its glowing hull almost serene in the face of the incoming attack. The Dread Reaper's main cannon fired with a thunderous roar, unleashing a beam of crimson energy that cut through space like a blade. The force of the blast shook nearby ships, causing smaller vessels to momentarily lose their footing in formation. The beam hurtled toward the human ship, bright enough to outshine the nearby stars. Klex watched with a mix of anticipation and desperation, convinced that no ship could survive such a devastating strike. But as the beam reached the human vessel, something unexpected happened. The energy didn't impact the ship. Instead, the light bent and twisted, spiraling around the vessel like a river flowing around a rock. The ship's hull absorbed the energy effortlessly, glowing even brighter as if it were feeding off the attack. "Impossible!" Klex roared, his voice shaking with fury. "How can this be?" "Admiral, the energy readings from the human ship, they're spiking," the lead scientist reported. "It's using our own weapons to power itself." As if to confirm her words, the human vessel began to pulse with radiant light. The glow intensified, spreading outwards until the entire fleet was bathed in its eerie luminance. Crew members shielded their eyes, some collapsing to their knees as the light seemed to press into their minds, filling them with an overwhelming sense of insignificance. "It's not just technology," the scientist whispered, her voice trembling. "This ship, it's alive. It's something far beyond us." The human ship moved for the first time, its sleek form cutting through space like a predator stalking its prey. It approached the Dread Reaper, unbothered by the smaller Zarkan ships scrambling to block its path. Each time one tried, it simply disappeared, erased from existence without a trace. On board the Dread Reaper, the crew frantically worked to recharge the main cannon, their confidence shaken but not yet broken. The Dreadnought's captain opened a channel to Klex. "Admiral, the human ship is approaching. Permission to engage with auxiliary weapons." "Granted," Klex barked. "Do whatever it takes to destroy that thing." The Dread Reaper unleashed its arsenal. Missile salvos, plasma torpedoes, and kinetic projectiles fired in unison. The barrage was so intense that it lit up the surrounding space like a miniature supernova. Yet, as before, the attacks seemed to dissolve into nothingness, absorbed by the human ship's impenetrable hull. And then the human vessel retaliated. Without a single visible weapon, the ship emitted a wave of energy so precise and focused that it targeted the Dread Reaper's critical systems. The lights on the Dreadnought flickered and died, plunging the massive vessel into darkness. Crew members screamed as gravity failed, leaving them floating helplessly in the dead silence of the ship. The human vessel didn't destroy the Dread Reaper outright. Instead, it disabled it completely, rendering the Zarkan Empire's most powerful weapon nothing more than a drifting husk. Klex watched in stunned silence as the human ship hovered near the disabled Dreadnought. It sent out another transmission, this time directly to him. "Your weapon is useless. Your empire is powerless. This is your final chance. Retreat or your fleet will be erased." The command deck was silent. Klex stared at the transmission, his pride warring with the fear that had taken root in his chest. The human ship had dismantled his fleet, humiliated his forces, and now it stood unchallenged, daring him to continue. "Admiral," the scientist said, her voice soft but firm, "we've lost. If we don't retreat now, there won't be anything left of the fleet, or us." Klex looked around the room, seeing the fear and despair on every face. He wanted to fight, to prove the might of the Zarkan Empire, but deep down, he knew the truth. This was no ordinary battle. This was a reckoning. He took a deep breath, his voice heavy with defeat. "Order the fleet to retreat." The officers moved quickly, their relief palpable. As the ships began to pull away, the human vessel remained motionless, its glowing hull a silent reminder of the power it wielded. Klex turned to the holographic display one last time, his heart heavy. "We will remember this day," he muttered, "but this isn't over." The human ship sent no further transmissions. It simply watched as the Zarkan fleet disappeared into hyperspace, its message delivered, its warning clear. The reckoning was over. For now, the secret of the human ship. The Zarkan fleet limped through hyperspace, its survivors scattered and shaken. For the first time in their history, the proud empire had been forced to retreat, not by a vast armada, but by a single, unassuming human vessel. Whispers of fear and speculation rippled through the fleet, spreading faster than the retreat itself. On the flagship, Admiral Klex sat in his private quarters, his hands trembling as he replayed the human ship's warnings in his mind. His pride, once a fortress of unshakable confidence, was now a hollow shell. What kind of power could reduce the Zarkan Empire's greatest fleet to dust without firing a single visible weapon? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft chime. It was the lead scientist, Dr. Vena, requesting an audience. Klex sighed and allowed her entry. "Admiral," Vena began, her voice tense but composed, "I've been analyzing the data we collected on the human ship. There's something you need to see." "Go on," Klex said, motioning for her to continue. Vena placed a small holographic projector on the table. It hummed to life, displaying complex energy readings and schematics. "At first, I thought the ship was using advanced human technology, something far beyond what we've encountered before. But the more I studied it, the more I realized this ship isn't entirely human. Klex frowned. What do you mean? Vena's eyes narrowed as she pointed to the glowing projections. The energy signatures we detected, they don't match anything in the known universe. It's as if the ship is drawing power from another dimension. And then there's the material of the hull. Our scans couldn't penetrate it because it doesn't exist on any elemental chart. It's not just advanced, it's alien. Klex leaned forward, his curiosity piqued despite himself. Are you saying humans have allied with another species? No, Vena replied, shaking her head. I think the ship itself is alien, but it's under human control. It might have been discovered, or even salvaged by them. Whatever its origin, they've somehow learned to wield its power. Klex stood and began pacing. The thought of humans, those resource-hungry primitives, possessing such a weapon was both infuriating and terrifying. How could they have gained access to something so advanced? The humans we encountered are barely capable of maintaining their colonies. Vena hesitated before answering. Admiral, there's a rumor among certain scientific circles. It's said that during the last great galactic war, humanity faced annihilation and disappeared from the galaxy's core for decades. Some believe they retreated to uncharted regions, places even the Zarkan Empire hasn't explored. And, Klex pressed. And, Vena continued, if the rumors are true, they may have discovered something in those forgotten corners of the galaxy. Something ancient, something powerful. Klex's mind raced as he processed the implications. If humanity had truly uncovered such technology, it would explain their sudden rise in power. But it also meant that the Zarkan Empire was no longer the galaxy's supreme force. What do we know about this Project Eclipse? Klex asked, recalling the term that had been intercepted during the engagement. Vena's expression darkened. Very little. It's classified even among human communications, but from what we've gathered, it's a defensive initiative, one designed to ensure no enemy ever threatens Earth again. Defensive. Klex scoffed. That ship wasn't defensive. It was a weapon of terror. Vena met his gaze, her voice steady. Maybe to us, but to them, it's a deterrent, a warning to anyone who would dare invade their territory. As they spoke, a low chime interrupted them. It was an incoming transmission from the bridge. Admiral, we've received a message, the communications officer said, his tone uneasy. It's from the human ship. Klex's blood ran cold. Put it through. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a single line of text. Your kind must learn restraint. This is your only warning. The message lingered for a moment before the display went dark. The room fell into an uneasy silence, broken only by the hum of the ship's engines. Restraint, Klex muttered, his voice dripping with disdain. They think they can lecture us. Vena spoke cautiously. Admiral, this warning isn't just for us. It's a declaration to the galaxy. They want everyone to know what happens if you challenge humanity. Klex turned to her, his expression grim. Do you think they'll follow through on their threats? I don't think they need to, she replied. They've already won. The fear of what they might do is enough to keep most species at bay. Later that evening, as Klex stared out at the endless expanse of space, he couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. The Zarkan Empire had always seen itself as invincible, the rightful rulers of the galaxy. But now, for the first time, it was clear that there were forces out there even they couldn't understand. The human ship had proven one thing beyond doubt. Humanity was no longer the weak, scattered species they had once been. They were a force to be reckoned with. The fleet's vanishing. The Zarkan fleet hung in hyperspace like a wounded beast, its scattered remnants limping toward the nearest friendly outpost. On the flagship, Admiral Klex stood at the observation window, his mind swirling with anger, confusion, and an unfamiliar sensation. Dread. The human ship's warning had been clear. This was their final chance. The Zarkan Empire, once unchallenged in its dominance, was now haunted by the possibility that it had awoken a power it couldn't control. "Admiral," a voice called from the bridge. Klex turned to see the communications officer. "The fleet reports that several ships have fallen out of formation." "Fallen out?" Klex snapped. "Explain yourself." The officer hesitated, swallowing hard. "They're gone, sir. No distress signals, no debris. Just gone. Like before." The room fell silent, the weight of the revelation sinking into everyone present. Dr. Vana stepped forward, her face pale but resolute. "Admiral, this isn't a coincidence. The human ship isn't finished with us." Klex clenched his fists. "We're in hyperspace. Nothing should be able to reach us here. That ship doesn't obey our understanding of space or physics," Vana replied. "It can follow us wherever we go." The holographic display flickered, and a single message appeared across all screens. "You were warned." Panic rippled through the fleet as more ships began to disappear. On board the surviving vessels, the crews reported strange phenomena. Entire sections of ships going dark, crew members vanishing mid-conversation, and whispers in the corridors that grew louder with each passing moment. On a mid-sized cruiser, a young officer ran through the halls, his heart pounding. He had just witnessed his commanding officer dissolve into nothingness, their figure fading like mist. The whispers in his ears were maddening, indecipherable yet suffocatingly close. When he finally reached the bridge, he found it empty, every console powered down, every crew member gone. Outside, the stars of hyperspace twisted unnaturally, as if space itself were unraveling. Back on the flagship, Klex watched in horror as the fleet's signals vanished from the holographic map. Each blip represented hundreds of lives, and they were disappearing faster than he could comprehend. "Admiral, we have to act," Vana urged. "Order the fleet to scatter. If we stay together, we're an easy target. And what happens when they pick us off one by one?" Klex shot back, his voice trembling with frustration. "No, we stand together. If this ship wants to destroy us, it will have to face us all." But even as he spoke, he knew his words were hollow. The human vessel didn't need to face them. It was dismantling them without effort, like a predator playing with its prey. The human ship appeared again, this time directly ahead of the flagship. Its glow was brighter than ever, its presence more oppressive. For a moment, everything was silent. Even the hum of the ship's engines seemed to fade, as if the universe itself were holding its breath. A voice filled the air, calm and unwavering. It wasn't a transmission. It was inside their minds. "You were given a chance to retreat. You chose defiance. Now you will be erased." The human ship released a pulse of light, but this time it wasn't aimed at the fleet. It spread out in all directions, a wave of energy that seemed to rewrite the fabric of space. The ships caught in its path didn't explode or burn. They simply ceased to exist, vanishing as if they had never been there. On the flagship, Klex staggered as the wave approached. Consoles flickered, lights dimmed, and an unnatural stillness filled the air. Crew members clung to their stations, their faces pale with terror. "Admiral," Vana said, her voice trembling but firm, "this is the end. We have no defense against this." Klex turned to her, his pride finally giving way to despair. "What do they want from us?" "Survival," she replied simply. "This is their warning. If we survive this, it's because they allowed it." The wave reached the flagship, and everything went dark. When Klex awoke, he was lying on the cold floor of the bridge. The lights had returned, and the hum of the engines was steady. He sat up, disoriented, and looked around. Most of his crew was still there, equally confused but alive. "Admiral," the communications officer said, his voice shaky, "we've lost contact with the rest of the fleet. We're the only ship left." Klex staggered to his feet, his mind reeling. "They spared us." A new message appeared on the main display. "Let this be a lesson. Your empire is not invincible. Return to your space and never venture beyond it again." Humanity will tolerate no further trespasses. The human ship vanished, its light fading into the void. Klex stood in silence, the weight of the message pressing down on him. He had started this campaign with an unshakable belief in Zarkan's superiority. Now he was returning with nothing but a shattered fleet and a chilling story of humanity's power. As the flagship limped toward the nearest Zarkan outpost, Klex couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of the end for the Empire. Humanity had been underestimated, and the price of that arrogance had been steep. For the first time in his life, Klex felt small. And for the first time, he truly feared the future.